might as well start with the panelists. We invite Sri Sanjeev Chopra, IAS, retired, former Director, Lal Bahadur Shastri, National Academy of Administration, Mussoorie. And he will speak on We the People of the States of Bharat. Sri Chopra.
Thank you, sir. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you, University of Haryana, Chanchal, and the Hans Foundation, Hans Seidel Foundation. The Hans Seidel Foundation, and in particular, two gentlemen who invited me, both Chanchal and Mahesh. Friends, ladies and gentlemen, 15 minutes to discuss 75 years of how India has become what India is. You see, every time, and I'll be very brief and I'll be very short. So, I'll tell you how it started. It started when I visited the Survey of India in February 2020. I was accompanying a group of young IAS officers to look at surveying techniques. Because at the end of the day, the IAS and most civil services are about land, about revenue, about management of those lands. And in our times, we used to have those zareebs and gunta chains and all these things. But today, they have satellite imagery, you have drones. So the session there for them was on what are the latest mapping techniques and how do we measure land. But while they were busy in the lecture, I just moved around and started looking at the maps which were on display at the Survey of India. And the first map that I saw was of 1796, which is the first official map that was published by the then Surveyor of Bengal. And then I moved on and on and on. Because every time any political configuration or change of name takes place in the country, the Survey of India has to print that map. So I went up to 1947, and then from 1947 to 2019, I found maps and maps and maps and maps, because every time there's a change of name. For instance, when Mysuru becomes Karnataka, there's a new map. When Punjab gets, Haryana and Himachal Pradesh, there's a new map. So I started looking at all the maps. And so the Surveyor General of India was a good friend of mine. I said, I want all these maps. So I got all these maps, and I filled up my study with all the maps. Being the director of the academy, I had a very large library, so I hung all these maps around in the library, and I started looking at these maps, and it was fascinating. And what I want to share with you, friends, is that if you look at this map of India in 1947, not one state, not one province, not one area is what it was in 1947, which brings us to the ship of Theseus. If every part has changed, is the new ship the same ship or the old ship? But over the next few maps, I will share with you the story of India through her maps, and how through maps, the Indian assertions of ethnicity, of linguism, of resource mobilization has happened over the last few years. Some of the things which I wanted to share with you was that, first of all, we had inherited, why the name states and not provinces, because the first map of India said provinces. It says provinces, states, and districts of India. Because as long as we were a dominion, the states were called provinces. The difference between provinces and states is that provinces were administrative constructs. To my mind, states are political constructs. And also the Indian Constitution tells us that while we the people of India have constituted India, India is also a union of states. Therefore, the states become a very important part, and to distinguish the states from the erstwhile provinces, you know that we had 11 provinces, 2 went to Pakistan, and Bengal and Punjab were divided into East Bengal and West Bengal. So on this map, I want to show you how, none of these areas, Punjab is no longer that Punjab, you don't see Madhya Pradesh here, but you see all these red patches here. These were called unions of states. Because in order to to club them together. They were called the Punjab states, Madras states, basically administrative measures which Mr. Menon had adopted to ensure that the integration of these 562 states would happen smoothly. I'll not talk about the instrument of accession except to tell you that Jammu, Kashmir, Hyderabad and Junagadh were 3 states which had not signed until 15th August 1947, followed by the merger agreement which got the revenue and civil and the judicial powers and it was a process of negotiation. So this map, if you were to see, you will not be able to recognize any known state in India today. Rajasthan is not there. Bengal, as it appears here, is not that Bengal. Assam, as it appears on this map, is not there. So let's move on to the next map of India in 1950, where India becomes a bit more recognizable. Next map, please. Yeah. So by 1950, we've had what I would call the administrative. Smriti, can you just get the next map on, please? So, so the next map, one of the first things that you'll see in the next map of India is that it is now called states under the new constitution. So that's the masthead. You see the masthead and what is written below. I don't know how much time academics spend on that, but I really enjoyed reading the designations of people who had done it. Surveyor General, the designation of the Surveyor General, Acting Surveyor General, the memberships, because they had the membership to the FRCIS, the Fellow of the Royal Society of Surveyors. Then it became the MIS, the membership of Indian Surveyors. So all these are little things, but very interesting things. The first map, everything was in miles. And after 1957, everything was reflected in kilometers, because by that time, India had adopted the KMS system. Okay, so I think the maps are not working. Anyway. I have the control. Okay, why don't you do it for me then? Next one. Okay, I'll get. Okay, we got it. No, this is the third map of India. Sorry. Yeah, we got it. Now, this is the map of India in 1950. By this time, you begin to see India in a slightly, you can identify, you can begin to identify India, although from this also, almost everything has changed here also, but you can still get a rough idea of what India is going to look like. And you had states under the governors, states under the Raj Pramukhs, and settling, these people, settling the old Rajwadas, getting them to compromise was a very interesting compromise because, like the Britishers, we also decided to have many nomenclatures for them. For instance, how do you settle between the Maharaja of Patiala and the Maharaja of Kapurthala and the other Maharaja? So the largest Maharaja was called the Raj Pramukh. The Chota Raja was called the Up Raj Pramukh. And then when you had many of them, as in Rajasthan, so you had Kanisht Raj Pramukh, Jesht Up Raj Pramukh. So we created, like the Britishers did. Incidentally, I must tell you that while all the princely states in India were His Highnesses, the Nizam of Hyderabad was called His Exalted Highness. For 2 reasons. One, that he contributed a lot of money during the First World War. And second, the Britishers needed him to issue a firman asking the Muslim troops that there is nothing wrong in fighting for them against the Khalifa. So the Nizam of Hyderabad is one of the most interesting persons in our history. Because at one point, he is issuing a firman to the Muslim troops of the country, go ahead and fight for the King Emperor. And he's also contributing to the Caliphate Fund. So he's doing both the things, and then he gets his son and his nephew married to the daughters of the thing. Incidentally, I'm just moving forward, but there were 2 people in this country whom Jinnah hated the most. It is not Nehru, Patel or Gandhi. It is the Nizam of Hyderabad and Sheikh Muhammad Abdullah. Because these were the only 2 people who were challenging his status as the sole spokesman for Muslims in this country. Hyderabad did want, at some point of time, or did have ideas about going to Pakistan, but he was not keen on getting Hyderabad because he felt that if Hyderabad becomes a part of Pakistan, then his authority would be challenged. And mind you, that Hyderabad at that time was the world's Elon Musk and Adani and Ambani and everybody put together. He had more money than what Jinnah could have ever thought of. Anyway, there's too much material, too much anecdotes, because one advantage or disadvantage of reading history is that you become a nice storyteller. So it's good fun, but anyway, we have to move on. So this map of India, as you find, there's some recognition of things that is happening. Now we move on to the next map. Smriti, may I give this charge to you? Okay. Yeah, you just hold it. Now, this is the first Hindi map of this country. The significance of this map is not that this is the first map of Hindi in this country. The significance is that right at the top you find the word China on top, or China on top. Remember, under the British rule or under the British Raj, the word China never appeared on the map of India. It never appeared on the map of India. The uppermost regions of India were called undefined territory and Tibet. Here is a map of India which shows both China and Tibet. Later on, you will find that Tibet disappears from the cartographic imagination of India. That's another story. But I must tell you that Tibet had refused to recognize India unless India were to agree that Tawang and Kalimpong and Darjeeling and Sikkim, they wanted it to be included in Tibet. But anyway, so this is the map of 1952, where many of the territories of India are now being given Hindi names without any official notification. Because Lakshadweep, Amdivi, Amandivi, and Miniko Islands were all clubbed together and called Lakshadweep for the first time in this map. Now, Lakshadweep is also very important because it brings us to the whole question of federal, state, and other things. I'll come to that a bit later. Let's move on. Next map. Next map is important because by 1952, the Telugus had started agitating for a separate linguistic state. And they said that, look, when India became independent, we were assured that country will be reorganized on linguistic lines. And let's remember that the Indian National Congress, not the Congress as it exists today, but when I talk about the Indian National Congress, that is the Congress which had dual membership. So you could be a Muslim leaguer and you could be a Congress. You could be a socialist and you could be a Congress. You could be a Hindu Mahasabha and you could be a Congress, right? So Madan Mohan Malviya was also in the Congress, Lajpat Rai was also in the Congress, and for some time Muhammad Ali Jinnah was also in the Congress. So that party in 1917-18 had agreed that India has to be reorganized on linguistic lines, and you had the Andhra Congress, you had the Sindh Congress, and you had all these congresses taking shape right from 1918. Therefore, organization of states on linguistic lines was a cardinal principle of the Indian freedom movement. So it is not really the gift of any constituent assembly or anything. It was the essence of the freedom movement. So that is the point that we keep in mind. In 1953, you got Andhra Pradesh Edition 1. After the death of Potti Srimalu. And then I'll not touch upon the point because Asha is the great expert on the States Reorganization Commission. 1956, we had the States Reorganization Commission. I notice I have only 6 minutes left, sir, so I'll speed up the thing. So you move on to the next map. So the next map, I think we'll have to do away with the maps. Let me just share with you the story. 60 you got. So what is happening is that, in fact, the title of my book, the first title of my book was Mapping the Indian States, Aspirations, Assertions, and Adjustments. Everybody has aspired. Punjabi Suba aspired for a much larger area. It fought, and then it adjusted. Nagas fought for a much larger area. They asserted, and then they adjusted. So every region in this country, no region in this country can also say that I've got exactly what I wanted. I mean, Bengal has not got exactly what it wanted. Assam has not got exactly what it wanted. So everybody's got something. And there's been a process of adjustment that has taken place all along. We talked about the reorganization of the Northeast in the morning sessions, brilliant presentations. The fact is that the nature of power is something which I wish that we should understand better. Nobody wants to give away power. Whether it is power in the family, whether it is power in a relationship, whether it is power at the level of the PM or the CM or the DM, nobody wants to delegate his power. So you have a running battle between every DM and every SP. You have a running battle between every CM and every FM. That's very natural. So we should understand the nature of power. Therefore, the reason why the 5th schedule and the 6th schedule have not worked is because CMs are as reluctant, if not more reluctant, to hand over power than the prime. And in fact, the lesser the power, the more reluctant you are to give that power, So in any case, I think I cannot, so this is how the story of India went on, adjustments, assertions. Now, initially, there was a lot of reluctance for the formation of smaller states and the Janasangha was totally opposed to it, because they believed that Bharat cannot have khands. Incidentally, that is why the preferred name for Jharkhand was Vananchal, and the preferred name for Uttarakhand was Uttaranchal. But of course, both these regions identified themselves with Jharkhand and Uttarakhand, and therefore that is what it finally became. 2 or 3 more points before I close finally. One is about the integration of Sikkim to India. I hate the word merger for the simple reason that by 1947, the majority population in Sikkim was Nepalese. The story behind this is that in 1870s, for the first time when the lamas were busy counting their prayer beads, they didn't want to cultivate their lands like most spiritual enthusiasts. So they invited the Gurkhas to come and cultivate the lands around their monasteries. So the lamas kept praying, and the Nepalese kept propagating both the soil and themselves. And by 1947, the majority population in Sikkim was Nepalese, 60%. And when the integration to India happened, at that time, the population of Nepalese was 67%. Therefore, all this myth and theory about smash and grab and all this thing is all bunkum. Sikkim became a part of India because the majority population, which was Nepalese in origin, found that they were disenfranchised in Sikkim because the Chogyal had given them 20 seats for Lepchas, 20 seats for Bhutias, 20 seats for Nepalese. So Nepalese were actually being disenfranchised. That is why it happened. The creation of Nagaland, I will not talk much because it's been covered in the morning. But the creation of Nagaland was the recognition of the fact that a state need not be financially viable, need not be financially stable, which is what the SRC had recommended when it wanted large border states, because before the BSF was created, the guarding of the borders was the mandate of the state police. So the Bangladesh or the East Pakistan border had to be protected by the Bengal police and the Assam police, and the SRC felt that unless the state is very, very strong financially, unless it has the financial and the administrative muscle, it will not be able to do that. I can go on and on and on, but so what I'll do is, I'll read the some passage from the prologue, some passage from the epilogue, and I hope that you will still read the book, because the essence is conveyed here. Okay. What are the lessons? It's taken me about 2.5 years to complete this study, thanks to COVID. Because of COVID, there were very little classes. I mean, all our sessions were suspended, and therefore I had a lot of time, and I had a lovely library and a great librarian who got me all the material that I wanted and had all the freedom. And I mean, the library is beautiful. I mean, the Gandhi Smriti Library at Mussoorie is absolutely beautiful. You have the views of the Himalayas, and you have all the books, you have the best of coffee. So none of the academics have that privilege, madam. Therefore, I could do in 2.5 years what will take a much longer time. Okay, the conclusions of my study are as follows. While the notion of identity is certainly fluid, and when I say notion of identity being fluid, what I want to say is that identity is neither cast in stone, nor is it pure gas. It's somewhere in between. Who's a Punjabi? Who's a Gujarati? You know, who's a Hindu? Who's a Sikh? So this notion of identity is fluid, and I lay emphasis on the point that it is fluid. Neither stone, neither an identity which cannot be reshaped, neither is it pure gas, right? I cannot. I mean, in fact, that reminds me, you know, I was traveling, and that is what made me so proud of my Punjabi identity. We were traveling once in a train to Amritsar, me and a friend of mine. In those days when traveling, AC chair car was the equivalent of traveling business class. So, you know, suddenly in the train, one Nihang Sikh came and sat down with us. Normally, our presumption is that people who are dressed in traditional attire, I mean, if you look at a Maulvi, if you look at a Panditji, if you look at a Nihang Sikh, you think, yaar, ye kahan Angrezi, and these are not the chaps who are of your class. I mean, that's how we have grown up. We do not expect them to be knowing English. We don't expect them to be talking fluently. But this chap, you know, you were talking about, I was in the Economic Times, and with another colleague, we were talking about, you know, changes in weather patterns and cropping patterns and things. So he looked around and said in Punjabi, I can't translate it, but he said, in a sense, that what is the season? Abhi kaun sa mahina hai? That what month is it? Was it August, September? He says, no. Punjabi mein kya hai? Punjabis ki kende hai? I said, you know, I didn't know. So then he told me, he says, and he said it, he says, whatever English you might speak. He said it in Punjabi, which was very effective. He says, Kaka ji, sons, jinni marzi Angrezi bol lo, that you may speak fluent English. Kise ne tuhanu Angrez da put nahi kehna? And no one will call you the son of an Englishman. That was a revelation. I mean, I think that I should have, I mean, if there was a WhatsApp in those days, I should have taken his number. I should have told him that, look, you have made me realize who I am. And that was the day I started reading all the Punjabi literature that I could lay my hands on. Sorry, I'm diverting, sir, 2 minutes because it was a joke. Language is usually a force. Am I allowed 2 minutes? Okay. Language is usually a force which brings people together, But in the case of Punjabi, the script became the divisive bone of contention. And incidentally, the battle of Punjabi was fought in Urdu, Urdu and English, because nobody knew Gurmukhi and nobody knew Hindi at that time. The entire debate was carried on by the Urdu press. Third, political parties changed their perspective over time, as we have seen, and political parties have worked together. I want to place on record that the RSS and the Congress have worked together on several occasions in the past. Today, neither the RSS would accept it, nor the Congress would accept it, but if you see my book, you will find many instances where they work together. There's a gap, the very important point, migration affects demography. Demography affects electoral politics, and there's no running away from it. English press and the Hindi press and the regional press have different perspectives. Last but not the least, history is written by victors, but the last point is that while 7 decades is a long time in the history of an individual, for a nation, history spans centuries, and from a civilizational perspective, one has to look at millennia. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you, Sri Chopra.